will always prevail. Duterte thought he could escape accountability by withdrawing the Philippines from the ICC in 2019. But what we are here to say, no one is above the law. No amount of political maneuvering can erase the blood on Duterte's hands. The ICC investigation must push forward. Duterte and his cohorts must be brought to justice, and the Philippine government must fulfill its obligation to its people by returning to the ICC and upholding the principles of human rights and international justice. Vandaag staan we samen om gerechtigheid te eisen voor de slachtoffers van de oorlog tegen drugs onder Duterte. Dit is geen vergeten hoofdstuk, maar een open wonder. Het internationaal strafhof is de sleutel tot gerechtigheid. Duterte en zijn medeplichtigen moeten verantwoording afleggen. Geen gerechtigheid, geen vrede. We are honored to have with us today a distinguished panel of legal experts and advocates who have tirelessly fought for the victims and their families. Attorney Cristina Conti from the National Union of People's Lawyers, who serves as legal counsel for the victims of the so-called drug war. Attorney Gilbert Andres from Center Law Philippines, also a legal counsel for the victims and human rights lawyer. Attorney Benji Aquino, from Redress, an international legal NGO that focuses on accountability for international crimes. And Lian Jimenez, coordinator of Bayan Europe, who will provide us with updates of the movement's plans to sustain the fight for justice in the coming months. Without further ado, I'll pass the floor to our first speaker, Attorney Ms. Condo.
Good afternoon or good morning. Good afternoon, good day, wherever you are in the world. I represent a group of victims in the Philippines that come over from Manila last Friday. At the same time, the International Criminal Court issued an order regarding, this is the most recent development in the case, regarding disclosure processes and participation of victims. Of course, the more important dates for all of us will be March 11th, the arrest of Duterte in Manila, and March 12th, the surrender of Duterte to the International Criminal Court. And of course, for the victims who have been on this case for more than 8 years, almost 9 years now. On the point of Rise Up for Life and for Rights, we submitted a communication August 2018, which included direct information about the cases of 8 victims. And this submission is only one of 53, as far as we know, communications submitted to the Office of the Prosecutor, which is why the court was compelled and convinced to open an investigation by 2021. And now that we're moving towards trial, and this is clearly in large part due to the arrest of the defendant, because the court does not conduct trial in absentia. We're now moving to trial, and with certainly a big deal of hope for the victims. For the victims, the arrest of Duterte was a pipe dream, and for a long time, they thought it would have been impossible, especially as this year he announced his candidacy for mayor of Davao. I'm sad to hear that he remains on the ballot, but nonetheless, he will stay in detention. He must stay in detention here in The Hague to answer for his cases. So first, the ICC pre-trial chamber clarified in the order last Friday the process as to discovery and disclosure of evidence. The chamber made deadlines or gave deadlines as to the submission of information of evidence that the prosecution has to provide the defense ahead of time. In turn, Duterte is also being asked of certain information that would be important for the prosecution as well. And that would include, by April 11, 2025, his indication if he would avail of or he would invoke grounds to exclude criminal responsibility, meaning he has to tell the court right now by April 11th if he intends to invoke insanity, incapacity, self-preservation, duress, alibi, and the like. This is in line with the processes of the court, and hopefully these are matters that are settled before the confirmation of charges set on September 23rd, and for I think 3 or 4 dates after that. For the victims, of course, in for rights and for that and for rights, it's been a long time coming. And for the victims, the order also indicates sort of an indication of how they will progress. Right now, the victims participation and reparations section is being asked to provide proposals as to mechanisms for application and eventual participation of the victims. Of course, we look forward not only for the participation in the end, but as to contributing to how best the victims can participate. And while we understand that victims are not required to be in the Hague at any time during the trial, uh, some of the victims are very much keen on coming over. This would hopefully not only show the world, but certainly the Filipino community here, that EJKs have occurred in the Philippines. It is terrible thing to deny until today that EJK happened, that EJKs happened, and that EJKs are a hoax, as was raised in the Senate investigation in the Philippines last week. Hopefully, moving forward, the lawyers here and the lawyers in the Philippines will be coming together, and the victims and their supporters will also come together to move this case forward in the best way possible, most rational, most sane, and most intelligent way. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Attorney Conti. I will pass the mic now to Attorney Gilbert.
Morning, I'm Attorney Gilbert Andres. I'm the Executive Director of Center Law Philippines and also an ICC listed counsel. Center Law has been representing victims of the war on drugs before domestic as well as international mechanisms since 2016. We have 3 calls. First, we want to call on the Filipino people. Let us not lose sight of this issue of justice for the thousands of victims of the Duterte war on drugs. Secondly, we want also to call our fellow Filipinos to respect as well as to unite in the call for justice, consistent with our Filipino value of pakikipagkapwa-tao. And third, for the victims of the EJKs under Duterte's war on drugs, we will present your views and concerns consistent always with your security concerns. And I think we can all unite as a Filipino people in attaining what we call pakikipagkapwa-tao and the spirit of mabuhay. Mabuhay po tayong lahat.
Thank you, Attorney Andres. Now let's go to Attorney Benji.
Good afternoon, everyone. I'm Benji. Just to give you a situation of my background, I used to work in the Philippines with them. Even before I came here, I documented cases of human rights violations and submitted representations to the VPRS and the ICC on behalf of at least 100 victims. But I've since moved here in The Hague to work with an NGO that deals with specifically international criminal law. The brief that I got today was to talk about human rights and the ICC, and that was a very hard brief because the International Criminal Court is not a human rights court. It's in the name. It's a criminal court. And as I was scrolling through social media, looking at what were the conversations that are happening, I would notice that they would focus on the procedure, that they would focus on the next steps, they would focus on the criminal aspect of this proceedings. And those are very important. Those are things that the victims have to know for them to be able to participate. But I just want to reel it back in and remind you that that the advocates started this advocacy through a human rights lens and a human rights narrative. So I just want to remind you a few things a few human rights violations that the Duterte administration committed. Of course, we know that they violated the right to life by killing people. They violated due process and fair trial by planting evidence, by arbitrarily detaining people, wrongfully detaining them, denying them of counsel, particularly because of intimidation from police officers. Whenever victims would go to the police stations to get copies of their police report, for that report to form files that they could then submit to domestic courts, they will be intimidated. Those documents will not be given to them, effectively denying them of their recourse to the courts. We also have heard of public attorney's office, and I have very much respect for people from our public attorney's office, but we have a lot of victims who would receive advice from the public attorney's office to just plead guilty so that their cases, their sentences could be reduced. We have also seen violations of liberty and security of person when they are being arrested wrongfully. We have seen how children's rights have been violated also in the cases where children became collateral damage, such as the 3-year-old Micah Urbina. We have seen violations of the right to health, the drug problem, although arguably is also a public health problem and it's not being approached in that way. We are seeing issues relating to the right to effective remedy. Again, they could not go to courts. That's why they have to fly all the way here to the ICC because our courts are unwilling and are able to try these cases. And also freedom of expression and association. And I think the journalists that are in this room with us today would know better than that of how it was so hard for them during those times. But in the context of the ICC, they are once again trying to impede the exercise of victims' rights through disinformation and harassment. And how does this happen? Through the disinformation, they are able to feed propaganda that the cases will not hold water. Through the disinformation, they are trying to convince the victims that Duterte will eventually be set free. And that's scary for them. They've put their hopes on this case only to be told that it will not prosper. We have received reports from local organizations where victims are already considering withdrawing from submitting more evidence to the case and submitting representations to the ICC because of this fear, thinking that their cases will lose in the long run. And this is something that lawyers could also be doing. That lawyers can only do so much as regards providing the correct information. We all need to stand together and fight all these trolls, no matter how many they are, in the thousands, in the millions, to make sure that the correct information would reach the victims and they would not be discouraged to participate in the proceedings. I would also like to take this moment to say that many of the rights that I mentioned, those violations, they have not been taken forward to the case before the ICC, which focuses on crimes against humanity of murder. But how about those who were raped during these illegal operations? I know and I documented a case wherein a woman was gang raped by 3 police officers in front of her husband in exchange for that husband's freedom. What do we tell her? That her case did not make it to the ICC. And this is something that also we need to be thinking about. The ICC is obviously important in securing accountability for justice, but there has to be complementary mechanisms that have to be done. That may be through domestic courts or maybe the United Nations or any other accountability bodies. But this time, what I feel has been missing in the conversations that have focused on procedure and criminal law are the conversations on human rights and the conversations on how victims are being left out. I would also not to disagree with the prosecutor. The prosecutor also needs to be strategic in which cases it would forward to make sure that it can make a strong case and secure a conviction. That is also what we want. But I'm saying that there is a need for these other cases not included in the charges to still also be addressed. They deserve redress, they deserve justice just as much as those victims of the killings do. Thank you.
Lastly, we have Leanne.
We've heard from our esteemed panel of lawyers here this morning, how the families of victims are preparing for the battle ahead. We very much welcome the fact that ICC will be trying this case. And this is a rare opportunity that victims are given due process or due recourse, especially from a justice-depraved country like the Philippines. Para sa amin, mahalaga ang bumulong na kaso sa ICC at upuskayan natin suportahan ang prosesong ito. But at the same time, we continue to urge the Marcos Jr. administration to rejoin the ICC. If his intentions to cooperate with the ICC are truly genuine, if his intentions are truly meant to serve justice to the victims of the Duterte's crimes, then Marcos Jr. should have no problem returning to the fold and reinstating the Philippine government's membership to the Rome Statute. Nevertheless, we reiterate that the ICC trial against Duterte is indeed a victory for the Filipino people. It is a step towards justice, but key to achieving complete justice still lies in the collective strength of the people. Sa hanay ng Filipino community dito sa Europa, inaasahan din natin ang tuloy-tuloy na iba't ibang mga forma ng pagkilos at aktibidad upang magpahayag ng suporta sa mga biktima ng EJK, ng mga human rights violations at ng drug war ni Duterte. At gayon din ang pagpapalakas ng panawagan para siya ay panagutin. As we speak, our kababayans are congregating in Brandenburger Tor in Berlin for a demonstration demanding Duterte be held accountable for his crimes against the Filipino people. Similar activities are set on March 26 and 27 in Brussels and Switzerland, respectively. And on March 28, this is Duterte's 80th birthday. Various organizations, not just here in Europe, but across the globe, are preparing a birthday surprise for him. These are centralized and coordinated mobilizations to take place in key cities all over the world. And this will be led by various Filipino organizations who will continue the call for justice and accountability. Here in Europe, numerous demonstrations and protests are planned in Paris, London, Brussels, and other major cities. And on the same day, we intend to launch here in the Netherlands a broad alliance of Filipino organizations, individuals, and solidarity allies across Europe, united under the call Duterte Panagutin, called Duterte Accountable, Justice Now. I would also like to take this opportunity to express our gratitude to the Dutch people for their solidarity in this fight. We willen onze diepste dankbaarheid betuigen en het Nederlandse volk voor jullie niet aflatende solidariteit in de strijd voor gerechtigheid en verantwoording voor de talloze slachtoffers van Duterte's brede regime. De weg die voor ons ligt, blijft lang en afdagend. Maar met jullie voortdurende steun en solidariteit zijn we hoopvoller dan ooit dat het recht zal zegevieren. We hopen jullie te mogen verwelkomen bij onze verschillende demonstraties, forums en misschien zullen jullie zelfs deel uitmaken van de brede campagne-alliantie die we aan het opzetten zijn. Bedankt dat jullie achter ons staan. Samen zullen we niet rusten tot Duterte in zijn trawanten ter verantwoording zijn geroepen. From the Philippines to Europe and across the world, we will continue to expose Duterte's crimes and hold him responsible. We will remain steadfast in our commitment to justice and accountability. Thus, we reiterate our call: hold Duterte accountable for all these crimes. Duterte panagutin, justice now. Thank you.
Again, Kain Vreden. Thank you to our panel of speakers for your opening statements. At this point, we would like to open the floor for questions from the media. We encourage our journalists here to ask their questions whether online or in person. To kindly introduce yourself and your media organization and to whom you are directing your questions to. The floor is now open for questions. Thank you.
Mr. Peter, that he has heard victims being afraid and possibly want to withdraw from these proceedings. Are you hearing the same from the victims you represent? And can you give some examples of the kind of harassment that your clients are suffering?
Because Ali Sheila is our client. For the Filipinos here, Ali Sheila is Ali means lady, yeah, Sheila. So Ali Sheila has been used by the Vatican as part of the narrative that the EJK victims are fake. They even use the term Panin EJK or planted EJK victims to diminish the victimhood of these people. Aling Sheila was in one of our activities holding the photo of her son. That son had been killed last year actually in a vigilante killing, but it was during Marcos's time. People were trolling her on social media. They were saying that Aling Sheila is a planted EJK victim. Aling Sheila actually lost two of her sons. Generally, in the war against criminality, these two sons had been arrested during the time of Duterte, and clearly she falls as within the category of Duterte's victims. She had every right to be there. And as you mentioned by Benji, there are a lot of different victims of Duterte out there. And it's not just the war on drugs. He had the war on dissent, he had the war on the tambay, he had the war against the COVID virus, and so many other fronts in his all-out war against almost everybody who didn't love him. But Dr. Aling Sheila, she has been trolled incessantly, and these online attacks have spilled over, and from what we think, have posed physical security threats. We have taken several steps to secure her safety, and I believe that, well, yesterday she was at the activity. It's okay, but she was at an activity, and in the next week, we'll be taking steps to not only hold people perhaps accountable, those who've been trolling her. One of the videos that was put up saying that she was a Tanin EJK, a planted EJK victim, had 2 million views within the first hour. And the attacks, the verbal attacks, rather written verbal attacks against her have included, of course, direct diminishing of her victimhood, but also gender-based attacks that, well, I don't want to repeat those things, but clearly vile. From what you've seen, Duterte has brought out the worst in the Philippines. I think Sheila is but one of few Filipinas who have been, well, among the victims. There have also been people whose photographs of their kin. So I think this is where it has hurt the most. When the victims come up to the public with a photo of their beloved. For several of our victims, their photo in front of the media have been altered to show somebody else's photo or something else. Thankfully, we've had news outfits clarify and show the real photo. But then these photographs have already gone viral. And with the faces of the mothers out there, we don't know how much of, in terms of security, how much of a threat that not only Duterte, but his supporters would be. And because of the fervor that he elicits among his supporters, well, we don't know how things will turn out. But would also like to point out that there have been other attacks collaterally, including myself, including journalists, including everybody else who has supported or helped out these victims. Even if we would say that these are just online, there have been reports of physical hounding in the communities where these people live. I myself have been, stared down in some places, not only in the Philippines, but I don't know here, because I try to keep a low profile, because they've been turning out in droves here. So it creates fear, and it creates insecurity. And lastly, just a point, I'd like to raise to to your attention the feelings and the insecurity it creates about the victims' children. That they felt that in speaking up, if they were to put their own security at risk, they would rather not. And that has been terrible, and that will be terrible in the long run, because if you don't have the next generation able to speak the truth, then that would be the end of critical thinking for the Filipino people.
When we took up the case of a Tokhang survivor in 2016, we already recognized that there's really an acute security concern for the victims of the war on drugs. And Center Law implemented as early as possible security measures, such as the do no harm principle. So as much as possible, we didn't want to really expose the victims' families, because we knew already that the environment in the Philippines, especially online environment, is very intimidating. Hence, when I checked with our families, fortunately, there were no direct threats, but we always presume there will be threats, whether or not it's intimidation in person or online. That's why we always want to put a premium on the security concerns of our victim families and the do no harm principle.
I think just to reiterate what Jake asked about the possible effect on your clients. Are your clients having any second thoughts about pursuing this case, or are they not affected by the threats?
On our part, thankfully, the mothers that we have assembled together in recent days have only been emboldened by these attacks to continue forth. However, we understand that there is pressure not only from the outside community, from their immediate neighborhood, but also within their family to, and this is pointless, to quote unquote withdraw the case against Duterte because they cannot. And the action of one mother to quote unquote, if that is possible, to withdraw or to take out her name or not participate in the ICC case or however they imagine it to be, that would have no effect. So there is a lot of misconception that we need to correct, but perhaps addressing the DPS and their ilk, whether paid or not, your actions have actually just emboldened people not only to press with the case, but to come forward. Because the more we hear the narrative of the EJK victims, the more we hear about the killings and how they happen, the more we are able to counter the narrative that these are fake incidents, that there were no EJKs, and then, oh, it's 30,000. How can you prove the names of 30,000? So if you come forward with names, and it's been very powerful, if you come forward with names, if you come forward with pictures, and for many of the journalists, you've been covering these cases on the ground with names, with incidents, with stories, narratives from the police themselves, the counter narrative of the victims, of their families, that, oh, my son was just buying soft drinks at the local store. My son was coming home after work. Unfortunately, it was at 3 p.m. and maybe the police thought that he was part of a gang, etc. The counter narrative has been really important, also in the Philippines, to interrogate within this wrong narrative.
For all our victims groups, they have no doubt that they want this quest for justice, and in fact, they're willing and able and ready to go through this long process of justice because they know that Duterte's arrest and initial appearance is just the first step towards the quest for justice.
I just want to add something about what Attorney Christie said. The combating of misinformation is extremely important because that's what's solving the problem. Maybe the victim groups that Attorney Christie and Attorney Gilbert have been engaged with are not so affected by it, but definitely we just had a poll in Philippine CSOs last Friday, wherein some victims are still already considering withdrawing from these cases. And if this continues, we might lose the number of victims who might be willing to testify as witnesses before the court. And while there may be other pieces of evidence having no witnesses, if it comes down to that, will really I don't want to say I don't want to say it will be fatal, but it will affect the proceedings. But let's not reach that stage. I will reiterate the Christie's call that let's fight the misinformation because that's the only thing that's causing these things for the victims to react this way.
So, sorry, can I just add, stemming on from what he said about, Benji said about other victims, so that are underrepresented. There are groups already in the Philippines, led by lawyers, and the Duterte Panagutin Network, to gather as many victims as possible, to reach to them, and educate them as to their options, and if necessary, to represent them and assist them in their representations. This is important because so far, there's been like a core group of victims who have come forward and pressed on with this case, with the thousands others either unable, intimidated, or simply uneducated, not capable enough to engage in the process, but still under the harm that has been caused by the Duterte. And so from the shadows or from the darkness, we're hoping that many victims will come forward, even if they were not to be qualified before the court. There are very specific parameters for participation before the court. As we all know, the Philippines left in 2019. What happens now with the victims from 2019 to 2022? They are very well out of the scope of the ICC investigation, but very much victims. We hope to reach out to them as well and form sort of a solidarity movement, because hopefully they would understand that the victory of one or of some would still be the victory of all.
But what will be your message to those who are, having that second thoughts? And do they have options? Are there safety, I mean, can the ICC offer their or assure their safety in the proceedings?
Again, the ICC does not encourage or require the victims to come to the Hague or to be in the courtroom when Duterte is present. In fact, they've seen it as possibly a re-traumatization. I mean, just seeing Duterte, the one who killed your father's son, and brother-in-law, etc., in the same court would really be quickly crippling or paralyzing. So first, there's that. But the participation of victims also. The court takes and has security measures in place, especially for the anonymization of their participation. They may not be, if you're just a participating victim. As a participating victim, you can opt not to be named. And in fact, in the ICC, you are identified by sort of numbers. Because the testimony or your statement about your victimization is technically not required to move the trial forward, because again, victim's participation is different from your victim as a witness. And as a witness, of course, that would be the realm of the office of the prosecutor. But as to victim's participation, there are mechanisms in place, but well, just to be upfront about it, at this point, it would not involve putting everybody in a witness protection program or a victims protection program. What the ICC actually envisions is that the healing comes from within, and that the circumstances would allow these victims to remain and stay in their communities, even after the case has been, well, concluded.
Thank you. Any other questions from?
Yeah, I have a question in common to all the people on the table. How can we as media distinguish the difference between the right information and the wrong information? I mean, that's a major thing, I guess.
So that is a very important question, and I was hoping the journalists would help us do that. But in this case, Redress is creating sort of a Q&A, collating all the misconceptions that have been going around on social media and answering them. And I would like to say that Redress, with our partners from the victims' rights working group, such as the Federation for FIDH, Fédération Internationale pour Droits de l'Homme, and also the Coalition for the International Criminal Court, we are creating a document that will answer all these misconceptions. And we believe that we are well placed to do that, as many of our staff are really trained in international criminal law and are best placed to be making these statements. In a way, we could send that also to the media, for instance. It would also need a good way for it to be disseminated, not just to people online, but specifically to victims, because they're the ones who need that the most. If they knew that the fake news isn't true, if they knew that their cases are strong, they would not be backing up. So this is one way I can offer you. Of course, it's more complicated than that, but as of now, that is one resource that I can offer you that we are already working on.
Yes.
I can answer that. As a free speech lawyer, I want to have two reminders for the press. Number one, always uphold and even return to the principle of balanced coverage. Secondly, always also be informed by yourself. So you must have to look at the matter, such as reference, if applicable, to the ICC statute. So let's just reiterate, journalistic ethics. Thank you.
And maybe also just to add from our experience in participation in the Quad Committee. So this was the four committees of the House of Representatives, which investigated the war on drugs alongside Duterte's participation or role in a criminal enterprise, in a syndicate that was involved in drug running, in drug smuggling, as well as, well, of course, extrajudicial killings. That's the name is in the Quadcom, everything is there, so. In the Quadcom, we made sure that we were only referring to authentic documents, and as much as possible, if the information should or could be attributed to a particular source, then maybe use that. In the case perhaps of killings, number of killings, we had the Philippine National Police, which was compelled to release figures. And the figure that they put out as dead in police operations was 7,640 between July 2016 to June 2022. So clearly, no matter how hard they try to count down this figure, they cannot do anything about the thousands. What they have tried to gloss over would be the number of dead from vigilante killings or unknown perpetrators. And as a particular point, if there are 30,000 extrajudicial killings. And the other side would say, give me all the names. But then who would be in the position to give all the names of those killed? It would still be government. We have dared the Quadcom to come up with a mechanism on how to determine how many really died. But there are other sources, including media accounts, including NGO accounts. And if the media would also refer to other media as well, we could come up with a clearer number. There are other academic studies actually, which have extrapolated the number of dead. And all these have been consistent. That the killings, the number of dead are between 12,000 to about 30,000. And before the ICC, again, just this is a matter of facts or information for the public. But again, before the ICC, the numbers don't really matter that much. Whether it's 30,000 or 2,999, I mean, it doesn't diminish the impact of the case, or I mean, it doesn't make Duterte less guilty. And so, as a last point, I think we need to distinguish, and this would be helpful, to distinguish what are matters of fact and which are matters of opinion. And for the most, what's out there has been matters of opinion. And for the media, I know that you're experts at this. Hopefully, we revert to matters of fact, and for opinion, we refer to the experts who might have, well, in terms of weight and relative value, might have the opinion more believable or possible than the others.
Yeah, well, I'm gonna answer the question in terms of how we view it in Bayan, in relate to our Kalubans. I mean, it is really a big challenge for us, differentiating which is real and which are lies being peddled by the Duterte camp. And for us, in the general public, the journalists, your role is very crucial to drumbeat what is the truth. And it's saddening in the Philippines. We know that our journalists are now being attacked as well by these supporters. They delegitimize, or they value the work being done by our journalists who are just doing their job, delivering the truth. So I guess for the journalists, yeah, as had been mentioned by this panel, fact checking is very important. Our goal for the supporters is to stop, attacking journalists when it comes to this issue. The killing is undeniable. Killings are undeniable. So there, we should always remain, ano, maging mapagmasyal, vigilant against all this, lies being peddled by, the other side.
Thank you, panel. Again, please introduce yourself and the organization that you're representing.
It's just on region. We're going to have midterm elections in the Philippines and even though Trump's back of the Dutertes, if you think about it, it affects the case that people think that the Dutertes will come back in power in next elections and will affect the willingness of the police, the Philippines, and the private citizens to cooperate with your efforts.
I'll answer that. The question is, will it affect the case? It should not affect the case, because the ICC is not a political body. It is a court of justice. It only looks at the evidence, the facts, and the law. And I think this is also a call for the Philippine government, for the Marcos Jr. administration, fully cooperate with the ICC in accordance with the residual obligations of the Philippines. Because whether the Philippines likes it or not, it has been a party to the ICC.
Just to quickly add, I'm creating the list of misconceptions, right, so that we can address it. And one part of that is there's this narrative being fed, and this is for the presidential elections, not for the midterm one, but that if Sara Duterte becomes president, she can renegotiate with the ICC for Rodrigo Duterte's release. We know that's not true, but that is what BTS supporters are buying. And this is, I think, is a way for them to push Sara Duterte's win to be president. That if you want Duterte to be free, make Sara Duterte your president. So it's this information in the context of elections. They go together. But yeah, Attorney Gilbert is right. It should not have any effect.
Yes, please introduce yourself and the organization.
Thank you. This is Leona from Truth Media Hong Kong. And then Duterte was arrested right after he visited Hong Kong, and according to some media reports in the Philippines, the Philippine police, they actually have requested Hong Kong police to cooperate in arresting him. However, Hong Kong police fails to do so on the ground that China is not a signatory to the Rome Statute. There are also speculations that he actually sought for political asylum from China. So do you think in general, not only the Philippine government, but leaders of the countries that are not signatories to the Rome Statute should become more actively involved in it to prevent them from being a haven of fugitives?
The international is precisely put up so that those to prevent evil that crosses borders. And the agreement of states to create these kinds of tribunals, even before the International Criminal Court, there were ad hoc tribunals already, where of course they are very controversial. And even the court until now remains controversial. The concept per se of states harboring criminals and being havens of criminality is anathema to international order. And at the minimum, Hong Kong could have invoked or could have said that they were cooperating with the International Police Criminal Organization. Right? So that was because the Philippines and Hong Kong were in the same position where they were also not members of the Rome Statute, but members of the Interpol. There are reasons and there are ways that you can go forward. Sabi nga sa Filipino, pag gusto, may paraan, pag ayaw, may dahilan. So if you want to do it, there's a way. If you don't want to, there are excuses. So hopefully it will have China and Hong Kong retake the decision, although most unlikely. But I guess for other countries, this would be an exhortation, and especially in the region in Southeast Asia. There's been a lot of talk about Southeast Asia being producing a lot of strongmen, and having only 2 countries out of, I think, 12 or 11 member states of the ASEAN, members of the Rome Statute. There's been pressure in the area, or talk at least in the area, that perhaps it's time for the ASEAN to think about joining this, the ICC, just so to prevent further domestic unrest. Because again, injustice somewhere is a threat to justice everywhere.
Just 2 points. First, there should be no impunity gap in whatever territory in the world. So in fact, I want to reiterate, it should not just be the 125 state parties of the ICC. We should actually be investigating or cooperating with the ICC. It should be all of the 195 states in the world. Number 2, even non-state parties can actually cooperate with the Philippines, with the ICC. And in fact, it's a poll. And that was what the Philippines did, even though it's not anymore a state party. And I hope even a country such as China can also fully cooperate with the ICC so that there will never be an impunity gap for international crimes.
Okay, next please. Introduce yourself and your organization.
Hi, good morning. I am Andy S. Turner from GMA Integrated News. Also, I'm a researcher, journalism, and digital media. First question addressed to Attorney Aquino. Your comment about disinformation networks in OFW or in the diaspora community. And a question addressed to everyone. Your comment on how this issue is affecting the social fabric, not only of the Filipino community in Europe, but also elsewhere in Europe, because there's a lot of protests happening, and we're expecting or anticipating, that there will be ongoing protests until September 23rd. Thank you.
Okay, so my comment on the disinformation within the OFW community. To be honest, I don't have complete visibility on that, but for 5 minutes, I stayed with the rally of the Duterte supporters. I did not know, I'm sorry, I did not know that it was them. They were also wearing black. So if there is any photos of me in that, please delete. No, but I do have a lot of friends, OFWs here in the Philippines who are really believing in the fake news. And some of them are the generators of these fake news, and I've met them. What's odd is without the fake news, they really believe in Duterte. Without the fake news, they really believe that they do not deny that the killings happened. They are supportive that the killings were happening because they think that it addressed criminality. So regardless of the fake news or not, they've already made up their minds. But one thing that they do is they propagate the fake news from their families in the Philippines, for example, who may not have visibility of what's happening here in the ICC. And they would easily believe them because they're here. They see it firsthand. So whatever accounts they make here, their families will believe. And those families would further spread that disinformation. So one comment that I have on it is, it really has to be quashed. If that's through mobilizing law students to comment on these posts, mobilizing all of us here to comment on this post, the lawyers may give you talking points so that it has substance. I think there has to be a coordinated response to also the coordinated propaganda machinery that they have employed.
I'll give 3 answers. I think we as a Filipino people, we can unite on 3 principles. Number 1, we always read mabuhay. We should have the culture of life, not a culture of impunity and killing. Number two, we always love our relatives, our family members. And indeed, we should have loved those who lost fathers, mothers, brothers, sisters, daughters, and sons during Duterte's war on drugs. Third, we can always actually unite in respect for one another, pakikipagkapwa-tao, and indeed, we should have respected the human rights and constitutional rights of those who were murdered in Duterte's war on drugs.
My input would just be, I agree that this appears to be a fight for Filipino morality, for the Filipino soul. And it's been just unfortunate that this has been depicted as a battle between Team Kasamaan and Team Kadiliman, Team Evil and Team Darkness. We forget that there should be Team Kabutihan. And I hope that is what shines through all of this. That, I mean, there still is redemption for all those who have succumbed to whichever Team Kadiliman, Team Kasamaan, and that we could still come together. We did this before. We recovered to some extent after martial law, where we kind of had the same circumstances, where there were, they would say, a few who were affected by the atrocities committed by Marcos, but a few relatively unscathed or unknowing about what has happened. That kind of division, that kind of unknowing about or lack of empathy for the other party, for the other group, has been instrumental in pushing forward this divide. And I don't even think that this is a divide between the poor Filipinos and the rich Filipinos, because you have poor and rich Filipinos on both sides of Team Kasamaan and Team Kadiliman. So it's been really a tough question and a tough problem to confront, but hopefully we see life forward with, as Attorney Gilbert says, this culture of life. In the Philippines, even in the ancient times, killing has been frowned upon. I mean, we don't have a culture of, and even until now, we have suspended, we're a Catholic country, the only country, in fact, that has no divorce. And where abortion is unintentional and intentional are criminal, are crimes. So we have we have put a great emphasis on life, and hopefully that is one point where we come forward and go forward towards that team kabutihan altogether.
Sure. Response to that. For us, the Duterte supporters are not enemies. In fact, we are very much welcome to dialogue with them, enlighten them regarding the issue, because this is an issue of justice, justice to victims. So they may be many here in Europe, as you've seen in some social media posts, but it doesn't mean that they're beliefs, right? But we are here to, open to dialogue with them and see that we as a Filipino nation, we are justice-loving people, and we want all the justice for all the victims that of Duterte's crime.
Okay, a follow-up question.
Sorry, I wasn't able to introduce myself earlier. Zen Hernandez, ABS-CBN. So just for everybody on the panel, are there efforts to take legal actions or measures on the threats and harassment online, if any? And also maybe to the lawyers that we have here, if those actions actually have an impact on the case, because we all know that there were also attacks on the judges themselves. So I'm just wondering if there's an impact there.
I'll go ahead. So first, with actions the victims might take. We're studying the whole array of options and remedies available. We're thankful that Meta has reached out. And on their part, they will also look into their community standards and whatever they can do on their end. We've also heard from, I'm not sure if it was TikTok or YouTube, but then, sino yung kabayan nila Mega? YouTube, Instagram, but some other social media platform have said that they are closely looking into this and that they are concerned. We could also pursue legal cases against the most vile and the most, well, most responsible, pardon from the ICC's playbook. So, from the most vile content put out there. But of course, we would, as much as possible, we would like to refrain from, creating and stirring up more cases out of one case. But of course, we understand that we have to make an example of some. We are also cooperating with some government agencies in the identification of those who have been, who have put out unprotected speech and speech that could be actionable. We just ask for a little bit of time anyway, because we're securing the personal safety of some of these targets.
For our part, we're constantly monitoring the situation and we're ready to choose whatever appropriate legal or meta-legal remedy is needed.
Okay, I'm going to read some questions from media online. First, from Michael Beltran from Pinoy Weekly. Rise Up is assisting over 200 families. How many of them will be directly participating in the ICC proceedings? And can you describe what this participation could look like?
One, for the families, they will all would like to participate, but then again, there is a technicality before the court that as soon as the charges have been confirmed, it will be different from from the coverage that's already been announced. So right now, the coverage of the investigation, which has not been terminated so far, would be crimes against humanity, acts of murder, and other inhumane acts between November 2011 until March 2019. That's a whole range of, or that's a lot of victims that we are looking at. The ICC can proceed in the case of Duterte and narrow down this scope. In fact, the warrant of arrest against him, when the prosecutor applied for it, he put in murder, rape, and torture as acts that could be ascribed to Duterte. The pre-trial chamber only approved, or maybe saw only reasonable basis to act on the charge of murder, the acts of murder. Until the charges have been confirmed, we are not quite sure who exactly the victims nominally would be. But we recognize that there are many other victims of Duterte's crimes, and we will endeavor as much as possible to involve them as well. And as I mentioned, those who would qualify to participate in the court would carry the interests of the other victims as well.
Okay. Next question, online from Janvic Mateo from Philippine Star. Is it necessary for drug war victims to participate in the ICC proceedings for them to qualify for reparations? For relatives victims who wish to participate, who should they reach out to?
No, it's not necessary for victims to strictly participate in the proceedings for them to qualify for reparation. The reparation order will be issued after the conviction, and we will be securing the conviction. Attorney Gilbert. The reparation order will be issued after the conviction, and there will be another application process for it. So if you are a victim, if you are also a victim witness, those are different. The benefit of reparation is not limited to those who participated. But as a tangential note, I just want to talk about reparations now. It's also one of the rights of the victims and is most often forgotten because they happen at the very end of the process. Reparation will depend on whether or not the convicted will still have the assets. And we are already hearing that the Duterte family has been dissipating these assets. So if they don't have those assets at the end of by the time of the conviction, it's possible that reparations will be very small and will only come from voluntary contributions to other states. So if there are CSOs listening right now in the Philippines, asset recovery, asset freezing, asset tracing is very important to happen right now. The more we delay, the more assets will be dissipated and hidden, and it will affect the right to reparation of the victims after the conviction of Duterte.
Does anybody want to add anything? The question again is it necessary for drug war victims to participate? And for relatives or victims who wish to participate, who should they reach out to qualify for the reparations?
So Attorney Gilbert and my group, already have a group of victims. We're assisting already groups of victims. There are several other groups out there, assisting victims who have been assisting victims since 2016, 2017, 2018. If you are not part of these groups, we are studying mechanisms within the Duterte Panagutin network on how we could accommodate your either request for information or request to participate. This mechanism, hopefully, you can work on when I go back to the Philippines. So there's a huge interest from lawyers in the Philippines to assist unrepresented victims. Right now, I cannot offer an email address or a number, but generally, that would be the Duterte Panagutin network who is willing to assist unrepresented victims.
And I can just add on the part of Central Law Philippines, we are ready to assist any of those victims who have not yet joined any group. And we're willing and able to assist you in showing your views and concerns to the ICC process.
Yes, last question here, and then we have one more question from the online present.
With regards to representation, because I understand that in the ICC, you have the defense, you have the prosecutor, and you have the lawyers for the victim. So without discussing the legal strategies, how do you explain that to the media? By the way, my name is Joe Falcasori. I'm from the Filipino Correspondent Network. Thank you.
When it comes to victims representation, in fact, the ICC is the first international criminal tribunal to put the interests of victims at the center. And it's really important that this is a victim-centered approach. Why? Because it's actually a quest for justice for victims. That's why there will be a separate process for the victims to technically participate. There will be a separate process for that. And for the lawyers to be appointed as the legal representative for victims. So that will be part of the process here in the ICC.
Just to add, one thing that we want to explain to the media is that in this case, it's the prosecutor versus Rodrigo Roa Duterte. The office of the prosecutor on one side and the defense team with Nicolas Kaufman on the other. The victims in the Philippines and well, for the Filipinos and the Filipino media, in the Philippines, the private complainant is represented by the prosecutor. If you have a private lawyer, that will stand in as a private prosecutor, acting under the control and supervision of the public prosecutor. In the ICC, it's a little bit different, that the victims can focus on their interests. Well, they may engage if they choose to do so in the prosecution in some ways, or assist the prosecution in some ways. But the focus of the representative of the victims will be to carry the interest and have the court hear the interests of the victims at all stages of the proceedings. And what would be important is not essentially your legal expertise or you may choose not to be involved clearly in the arguments as to the merits of the case. But what's important is that the court also hears the sentiments of the victims. In being a victim-centered court, this has been very important because in most cases, you lose that. And as was mentioned earlier, in pursuit of the most viable legal victory, quote unquote, there could be concessions. As was mentioned, Aminaya, or you plead guilty, just so you would secure an earlier release. In the Philippines, that's for smaller cases. But clearly, victims have to be heard, which is why they have a separate representation.
Any additional for the panel? No? We have one follow-up question here, and then we will answer questions from the media online.
And I would just like to make a follow-up on the freezing of assets. What exactly are the legal actions that were already taken by the camp to ensure the freezing of assets of the former president and other officials implicated in the ICC case? And then how will this impact the pursuit of justice of the victims? And also on another note, the Vice President, Sara Duterte, mentioned that they will take all means to be able to bring back the former president to the Philippines before the elections, which is going to happen on May 2025 or right after the elections, because the former president is also running for mayor. And this will happen prior to the confirmation of charges hearing on September 23. What are your thoughts on this?
Take a first stab at it. On the asset freezing and recovery, I don't think anything has been done yet concretely, but there's this news recently. I think it was in the Malacanang. Officers were asked if they will cooperate with the ICC, should the ICC order for the freezing of the funds and the assets. And they said that they would through the Anti-Money Laundering Council. So that gives us a bit of hope that there is a willingness to cooperate, and then maybe it's up to the local organizations in the Philippines to have that work stream started. So I think for now, our lawyers here are focusing on the prosecutions, on the legal strategies. But alongside it, these things should already be happening because the longer we wait, the more assets are lost and dissipating. So I would say there is none yet, but there should be. The second question is in relation with interim release. I think this is the interim release, no? I think I would leave the interim release question to Attorney Gilbert and Attorney Christie.
If there will be an application for interim release, center law, and lawyers and its victims are ready and able to give the views and concerns to actually tell the court to deny it. Why? Because the conditions for actually granting it are not there. There are still serious security concerns for the victims, for the potential witnesses. In fact, we have seen that online and in person. Secondly, Mr. Duterte, as stated in the RS1, is still a very influential man. And we have also experienced and seen that actually. So we will actually outrightly apply and state that it should be denied.
Okay. On that point, first, while speaking for the victims, as lawyer for the victims, we would certainly oppose any effort for the interim release or conditional release of Duterte. Because it would be very contrary to the victim's interests, as he himself poses a threat. And second, speaking as a lawyer accredited with the court, this kind of interim release that he seeks has not been granted by the court prior. In fact, the only other instance where the court has granted conditional release has been in a case of Article 70. or the the fifth crime, the minor crimes prosecuted in the court, called offenses against the administration of justice. For the four crimes, main crimes that the court tries, crimes against humanity, crimes of aggression, genocide, and war crimes, no interim release has been granted by the court for any of those accused of these crimes. So from my point of view, there is zero probability that Sara Duterte or the Duterte camp could bring home Duterte by May 2025.
Can I just quickly add, sorry, one of the grounds for the interim release that the pre-trial chamber would consider is whether or not it will be detrimental to the victims. Considering that the victims are still in the Philippines, if Duterte is brought back to the Philippines, especially in Davao, for instance, the victims that are there where the Duterte administration is still very powerful. I don't think it will pass that qualification. So I do agree with them. I don't think it's gonna get approved.
And then, sorry, on the last note, pero onward to another topic. We're very much interested, not only in the disclosure of aspects of the President Duterte, but hopefully of the Duterte plan.
Yeah.
Because Sara Duterte herself is facing charges, allegations of misappropriation of public funds, as well as corruption, possibly. And so it would be very interesting to proceed against the entire Duterte family as regards determination, identification of the assets that are in their name or under their cronies' names or under particular beneficiaries' names. So it is a whole campaign. It would not only be an effort for the freezing of assets for the victims, but it would also be a form of accountability for the crimes that are being imputed or attributed to Sara Duterte, and perhaps even Polong. During the Quadcom, I think there were allegations that Polong Duterte was part of the criminal syndicate with Michael Yang. So hopefully, if there was an investigation, if there is an identification of these assets, we could apply that to all these various charges against the Duterte family.
Okay, we have a last question online from Greg, George Cahiles of PNC. For Attorney Conti, just to clarify, Aling Sheila and her lawyers are preparing charges against those harassing her and studying. And what cases will be filed and how many respondents are you looking at? And for the full panel, what are you doing in the Netherlands now? Are you already coordinating? Are you already coordinating with each other to make a united representation in behalf of the families of the EGP?
So we're studying, so we just ask for respect for the moment because as I mentioned, the physical security of Ali Sheila has not been ensured. So we will see, and also Ali Sheila. So the other question is, what are you doing in the Philippines? So in the Netherlands, I actually came specifically here to coordinate with the court as regards victim participation. I've been in several meetings, although the court frowns upon disclosures. I guess on my part, it's impossible to deny it. We have been in touch with the court regarding representations, as well as other matters in relation to the upcoming case. There will be a few other meetings as well with groups here and with Attorney Gilbert here. We could begin these discussions, although again, in the Philippines, some discussion has already been underway.
But it's now the Holy Week, maybe I can refer to Saint John the Baptist. I'm here to prepare the way for justice for the victims of Duterte's foreign policy. Thank you.
Sana nasabi ko na gusto ko magbakasyon like Robin Padilla, no? Pero What I'm doing here in the Netherlands is I'm based here now. I work for an international NGO that focuses on accountability for international criminal crimes. And we work very closely with the ICC. So particularly what I do is I coordinate with Philippine CSOs, connect them to the ICC, answer their questions that they may have. I think that's the extent that I can disclose the work that we do here. But it's more of a support role for those who are in the Philippines. I'm here in The Hague, very proximate to the ICC, and we can facilitate conversations between the court and the victims and the representatives of the victims.
When I hear, along with the many kababayan na likod, no, we are here also with a lot of kababayan Filipino. We are here to stand up and represent the victims in a sense that we are one with them. We are behind you. We want you to continue on with this fight, and we are also calling on the Dutch people, the international people, to join us in this continuing fight for justice.
Okay, thank you to our panel. Thank you to the media who attended. We thank you all once again, our speakers, the media, and all of our guests for joining us today. The fight for justice does not end here. We invite you to be part of our upcoming forum on March 28th, where we will officially launch the Europe-wide coalition, Duterte Panagutin, Justice Now Alliance. This coalition will bring together various organizations and advocates across Europe in a united push for accountability and justice. So maraming salamat. Thank you. And before we go, we would like to invite the panelists to stand up and hold their placards for a brief photo opportunity for our other journalists present. Thank you.
Duterte panagutin!
Duterte panagutin.
Duterte panagutin!
Duterte panagutin.
Hold Duterte accountable for all his crimes. Justice for all the victims of Duterte.
Justice for all the victims of Duterte.
Duterte panagutin!
Duterte panagutin.
Duterte panagutin!
Duterte panagutin.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. For the general ethics, media, you're free to stay. The
Sarado ka na.
modern form of conversation, one,